Hello and welcome to the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's webinar series. My name is John Rujek and I'm the Vice President of Engagement for the Alumni Association. Thank you to our guests here at the locker room and McNamara Alumni Center who have joined us, and also our alumni and friends online today. Happy to have you here, whether in person or wherever you're tuning in around the world. Before I start the presentation, just a couple of announcements to share. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing free series being offered by the Alumni Association, where we have conversations with experts about career life and learning topics. Initiatives like the webinar series are made possible in part by our Alumni Association members. So if you're a member, thank you. And because of our members, we can create powerful opportunities and ignite success for current students and nearly 500,000 alumni around the world. And if you're interested in being a member of the Alumni Association and supporting our work, check us out at umnalumni.org/membership. Also, thank you to our organizational partner and webinar supporting sponsor, Liberty Mutual Insurance. Coming up, we do have another webinar that will be on April 17th with another great career coach here at the University of Minnesota, Whitney Moore out of the College of Science and Engineering, and she'll be presenting on leveraging positivity, moving beyond Think Positive. And you can find that right now at z.umn.edu/April17 webinar. Also, if you haven't checked it out, check out our Maroon and Gold Network. It's an online platform, kind of like LinkedIn on steroids, where we have over 1,700 alumni who have already signed up to share career expertise with both students and other alums. So if you're looking for a friendly informational interview lead or looking to investigate a different industry, we have lots of alums, both local and around the world, to connect with. And you can learn more about that at umnalumni.org/maroon and gold. Also, I will put in a plug for an event that our presenter, Maggie Tomas, is intimately involved with at the Carlson School. It's Tech Cities, where industry professionals, policymakers, educators, and emerging talent connect and share perspectives on the state of Minnesota tech. So seating is limited and tickets do sell out. I've attended in past years and it's a really great event, great networking. It is next Friday, March 8th. And if you're interested, go to techcities.mn. And I'm sure Maggie can talk more about it later too. Just a few housekeeping items. If you're on the webinar, you've joined listening using your computer speaker system by default. And if you'd like to listen over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane of your GoToWebinar panel, and dial-in information will be displayed. And for our guests here in the locker room, if you have questions during the presentation, you can ask Maggie. And also, if you're online, you can type in your questions in the question pane on the GoToWebinar control panel, and I'll be monitoring them along the way and can feed them to Maggie as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Maggie Tomas, who is the director of the Graduate Business Career Center at the Carlson School of Management here at the University of Minnesota. In her role, she leads coaching and business development for 8 different graduate business programs and leads a staff of 13. She has launched and led a number of initiatives at Carlson, including Tech Cities, which we touched on. Maggie's background includes teaching, counseling, and business development at both the graduate and undergraduate level. She is involved in the MBA Career Services and Employer Alliance and Make It MSP. She is a contributor to the Women of HR blog, Job Dig, and Work Awesome, where she writes about work and life integration. So without further ado, I am glad to welcome my colleague, Maggie Tomas.
Can you hear me? Yep, okay, wonderful. Thank you, John. Thank you for that warm introduction. I love hearing about all the wonderful things that the Alumni Association is doing. And thank you for those of you in person that are here, as well as those on the webinar. As John mentioned, my day job is I do manage the Graduate Business Career Center at Carlson. I have about 15 years of experience in career coaching, students, alumni, executives. And in my current role, it's worth noting that I manage the Graduate Business Career Center. So we work with graduate students and alumni. And the reason I think that's worth noting is typically when someone comes into a graduate business degree, they have a couple of years of experience before they launch into the next graduate degree. And oftentimes the reason they're getting that graduate degree is because they want something a little bit different. Sometimes it's to accelerate their career, but a lot of times it's that they're wanting something different. And also, business is worth noting is business is so broad. There's so many different options that we can provide them. So our office, we spend a lot of time helping students figure out what they want to do, how they're going to make this time investment financially and in time matter and lead to a fulfilled career, because it is a big undertaking that they're doing. And that whole like mission on helping them find something that fulfills them and makes them happy is very near and dear to my heart, because I'll go back and tell you how I got passionate and interested in career coaching in the first place. So when I was 18, getting ready to go to college, I decided that I knew exactly what my career was going to be. I was going to be a kindergarten teacher. It was going to be great. I made this decision for two very important reasons. One, I was going to get summers off, and that was going to be really great for the kids that I did not have yet at all. And two, I was going to get to work with kindergartners, and they're really cute and lovable. That was my sole reason why I was going into this career. I did not have any experience with kids. I did not grow up in a big family. I did not grow up babysitting. And I certainly didn't take personality assessments to help me figure out if this was a good call. I got summers off, kindergartners are cute. That is what, so I went forward and I got my degree in education. And there were a couple of instances where I maybe could have been paying attention a couple of times in the classroom. I was like, this might not be right, but I plowed right through. And then I got my teaching credential in California, an additional year and a half. And again, more instances of, this might not be right for you, but I just plowed right through. And in my first 2 years on the job, I taught kindergarten and I was miserable. Not because summers off aren't great and not because kindergartners aren't cute, but it did not play to my strengths or my personality at all. One thing to note is that kindergartners have a 15-minute attention span. So you plan your lesson plans for 15 minutes every day. I am not detail-oriented. I can barely manage half an hour to hour blocks that I have in my calendar here. That feels overwhelming. So 15-minute increments left me exhausted at the end of the day. I am an extrovert. And I was in my early 20s. I didn't want to go out with my friends on Friday night. I was tapped. I was tired, and I was having nightmares about 15-minute increments. Like that literally. So I knew something was off, and I did some soul searching. I decided to go back to graduate school, got my degree in counseling, and discovered career counseling, particularly at the student level, which made me really excited because hopefully I was going to help students not go through what I went through. So that is why I'm very passionate about helping people find out a career that makes them happy and help them stay happy in their current career. I now am a mother. Those kids that I was worrying about in the future, I have now. And as John mentioned, I write a lot and think a lot about work-life integration. And I'm always trying to find a way to be better at all of my different roles of wife and mother and worker and friend. And the more I research it and write about it and think about it, the more I realize that these roles are really intertwined. And I can learn something from my career that can make me a better mother. And I can learn something from my marriage that can make me better in my career. And that is sort of how Discover Your Career Language came about. It was me trying to learn from the different roles of my life and intertwining them and be better at work-life integration. So, let's see, we'll try to. Okay, here we go. So that's what led me to thinking about how marriage expectations and career expectations, there's some similarities, right? There's some similarities. When you are misaligned with how you're communicating with your partner, there's some similar, that frustration can feel similar to how, if there's misalignment with how you're communicating at work. How many of you are familiar with the book 5 Love Languages, or the whole theory? Okay, good. I had heard about it for a long time, and I only became kind of interested and acquainted with it several years ago when a colleague of mine, it was a Friday afternoon, and we were sort of lamenting our weekend plans and feeling overwhelmed as working moms, and we had too much on our plate, and adulting is really hard. And I was telling some story about how I was frustrated with my husband for something, and she said, "Oh, you just have different love languages." And I was like, "Okay." She goes, "Oh, just quick, let's take the assessment. Let's take it real fast." And so because we weren't wanting to, think about work too much more on a Friday afternoon, I took the assessment. And I was really frustrated with the results because gifts came up as my #1 love language, gifts. I was like, I am not some prima donna that only needs to get gifts to feel loved. This is not true at all. This is a ridiculous result. And my friend said, oh, no, that's totally you. What? No. Like, I like time with people. That is not me at all. She says, no, remember that one time when Mark gave you those earrings that like didn't seem like you at all, and you were like, what? This isn't me. Or remember that time when one of our colleagues gave you those personalized towels with your name engraved and you teared up because it seemed so thoughtful. I was like, oh, crumb, maybe this is true. And then it reminded me of this story that's a little bit famous in our household about a cake. So we moved here a little over 9 years ago from California. My husband's a Minnesotan, and like every good Minnesotan, he brought someone back, so he brought California me back. And so we moved here a little over 9 years ago, and at that time, I had a newborn, I had a 1-year-old, and I was overwhelmed, and it was my birthday, and I was like, I don't want to do anything for my birthday, I just want a cake. Like, I love cake, just get me a cake. That's all I want for my birthday. We're moving into a house, and it's like, okay, so he did what I asked, and he went to Lunds and Byerly's and brought this beautiful cake with flowers and had chocolate frosting. And I was like floored. I know, I'm making myself sound like a really big brat. But for me, cake is really important, and cake is really a vehicle for vanilla buttercream frosting. And we had been married for several years, and I love cake so much, and he did not know this. And I felt like, oh my gosh, like all I wanted was a cake, about my chocolate frosting. So clearly gifts mean something to me, and it's more about the thought behind it, someone knowing you and thinking about you, right? Like that is my love language. To also make myself sound not quite so bad, quality time together is tied with gifts. And quality time is sometimes in direct opposition to my husband's love language, which is acts of service. So Mark will take out the trash and do dishes, all these things that are wonderful, right? Sometimes though, I'll come home thinking we're gonna have this family day, and he's instead whipping up a new play fort, which is lovely, but it's not quality time, right? But he's showing his love by making this play fort for all of us, and I'm thinking we have no time together, right? So knowing that has really helped us. So now we do a lot of DIY projects together, where I have a say in them, and we're bonding, and the whole family's together, but he also feels like he's doing acts of service. And so we're speaking the same language. So that awareness has really shifted how we perceive each other. It doesn't make everything perfect, but it's definitely shifted how we see each other and how we communicate with each other. It helps me understand that me doing acts of service is going to make him feel loved, and it helps him understand that quality time is going to make me feel loved. It also helps me understand that when he's whipping up a play fort or adding a new bathroom to the basement without asking me, that is actually his way of showing love, and I can understand that. Okay, so what does all of this have to do with career? Well, I think that there's a big, similarity between understanding expectations and communication styles of those around you and understanding them of yourself in order to stay motivated in any situation. A friend of mine, and I'm going to go back to love language for a bit, a friend of mine used the love languages theory and it helped her relationship a little bit in communicating with her husband. Because every day she would come home from work tired, and she would make a from scratch homemade meal. And her love language, her top love language, is words of affirmation. So compliments, thank yous, right? Like someone saying, I noticed that you did this, verbally saying that. And every night she would make this homemade meal, and she put it out for the family, and every night her husband would eat it and say absolutely nothing, and then ask her to come sit next to him on the couch and snuggle and watch TV. And every night she felt like completely not valued or appreciated. His love language was physical touch, and hers was words of affirmation. They had a conversation about it. Now he says, thank you, the meal is so lovely. Thank you for all your work put into it. Now can we go on the couch and snuggle? And that simple act has helped her feel more satisfied in her marriage. And I think that understanding your love language and voicing that can help you feel actually more satisfied at work too. So I've come up with 5 different languages that, in my experience, coaching thousands of students and alumni, these buckets are the buckets I see most often that help someone stay motivated and appreciated at work. Praise, prestige, money, impact, and culture. A couple of years ago, I was thinking about my own career. I've been in my current role for 5 years. I've been at Carlson for 7. And I was thinking about my own career, and I was having a conversation with my boss about it and staying motivated. And he's like, well, you need to decide, like, what's number one? What's most priority? And that got me thinking about, like I said, all my conversations with alumni and students. And I thought it's going to be pretty powerful to create a framework around this, because it can be pretty simple and tangible, and it can help someone have a conversation with themselves with their boss. And also for any of you that are managers, it's going to help you better understand how to motivate your teams. The advantages of understanding your language, your career language, spill over into a lot of different areas. It adds to satisfaction, and you can see the results in a lot of different areas. After doing this for a couple of years and seeing the results with alumni, I have noticed an increased confidence in those folks at work. They feel more authentic. They feel like they can be their authentic self because they feel valued and appreciated. They're more driven. They're more driven to succeed. They feel like they can speak up if they don't understand something because they feel heard and they feel valued. Productivity increases. So again, for those of you that are managers, if you have someone who feels valued and their career language is being heard, they're going to feel more willing to produce and more excited about that. And the number one area that I have seen this come through is really in health and wellness. I mentioned that when I was teaching kindergarten, I didn't even want to go out at night, right? I was tired, I was exhausted, I'm a social person, and I was like 23 and I wasn't going out. Work was affecting my well-being, it was affecting my personality. And if you've ever been in a role where you're not feeling valued, and essentially this is all about feeling valued, right? And we feel valued in different ways. And if you've ever been in a role where you don't feel valued, it makes it harder at home. For those of you who are parents, it bleeds into parenting, it bleeds into relationships, it bleeds into wellness and nutrition and exercise. You don't want to do any of those things. And so when people make small shifts or big shifts, some of this will inspire big shifts to having their career language aligned with their work and their career and their place of work, you'll see increases in all of those areas. I've seen people like, yeah, now I'm exercising. Now I'm getting up each morning happy, so I want to exercise. Or my relationship with my significant other is so much better because I'm not grumbling about work all the time, right? So these are the things that can be the result of having alignment in your work language. All right, so now let's talk about each of the different languages. I'm going to give examples and share what I mean by them. And then at the end, we're gonna do a little bit of quizzing so you can hopefully help figure out what your career language is, or those that you manage with their career languages as well. So the first one is praise, pretty straightforward. It's kind of like the words of affirmation for the love languages, right? People who have praise as their top career language, they like feedback. They like specific feedback. So it's not just good job. Good job, thanks so much, good job. It's specific. So that presentation you just gave was so spot on, and that chart you added really helped drive home the point you were making. Or the positivity you bring to this office each day really helps motivate the team. So thank you for being such a positive force. Or gosh, making that initial relationship with that sales, with that vendor helped lead to that sale. And that has increased revenue by X amount. It's specific, right? So these people feel valued and they need to hear it. I've also noticed that people that have praise as their top career language, they value feedback in general. So these people also like to hear when you have constructive criticism for them as well. If there's areas of development, they want to hear that, because how many of you have had managers or coworkers that compliment you on everything, right? A compliment you get from someone who gives you well-rounded feedback and also can call you out on your stuff feels that much more powerful than someone who just constantly tells you good job, good job, good job, right? So these people like feedback, and they need to be in an environment where they can get feedback. And sometimes that feedback will come from your supervisor, your colleague. Sometimes it's the nature of your work that provides that feedback. And I'll give you an example for myself with this at the end. But that is essentially praise. I have noticed too that there are some work cultures that have incorporated this into like physical objects. So like pinning people if they've reached a certain sales, right? Like that's a form of praise, even though it's not verbal. In our own workplace at the business school, we've incorporated blackboards with those markers where you can write praise to team members, like, this X event was so great, it made the students so happy, or way to bring 10 new employers on campus for this. And for people that value praise, seeing that up there for a month or so feels really good. They're constantly walking by and being validated by that. So there's ways to do this that if you are in an HR leader, that you can create it for your team too without having the direct verbal feedback piece. So that's praise, that's number one. Number 2 is prestige. How many of you are familiar with The Office? I'm so excited right now because my 10-year-old is watching The Office with me. For those of you that have older kids, when you get to that point where they're gonna like watch stuff you like and laugh with you, it feels so good. So she doesn't get all of the jokes of The Office, but she gets some of them, and it's pretty fun. Anyway, this is one of my favorite episodes when Dwight sees a window with Michael Scott. Michael's the boss, that he might be the favorite right now because everyone else is really bugging him. And so he's going to take this window and he is going to get a new title. Dwight doesn't really care about being praised, and he doesn't care about money that much, but he wants that title. He wants the prestige, the feeling of importance that comes with it. Prestige is about titles. It's also about being in a room with important people, being at the table, being with senior leaders, feeling like an influencer. You feel valued, you feel like you're important if you get invited to that table to potentially make a decision, or at least be around the decision makers. You would like your title to grow as your work responsibility or as your impact grows, right? As your results grow, you want your title to match that. That is important. And I have coached lots of people who this is a big one, and that's okay. I think it's most important to be honest, just like I had to be honest about the gifts and the cake with myself. You got to be honest with yourself. I had a student who was only an alumni, I should say. She was in a job for about 1.5 years, and she had amazing strides there and really helped her organization, and particularly her unit, a lot. But the way the company went, you weren't going to get a new title for about 3 years. But to her, that meant a lot. She didn't care as much about the money or the raise, which would come before the title. She really cared about that. So she talked to her boss a little bit about, like, can we shift the title to at least more match what I'm doing? Because I have bigger scope and I want it to match what I'm doing. And that's going to help me feel satisfied and that this matters. And they were able to make that small shift. And then she kept going and was satisfied. She also made a shift by, she wanted to be in the room on some of those senior leadership meetings. And that to her felt like value, much more than the raise would. So that's prestige. It's really feeling like you're an influencer, and that can show up in the meetings and the conversations you're with, or it can show up in the title that you have. All right, next one. I put this in the middle because it seems like the most obvious, but it's for some people it's the most obvious, not for everybody. So I think a lot of people think the nature of work is so closely tied to money, right? Like we work for a paycheck. I actually think we work for a lot more reasons, but it is tied to money. And for a lot of people, money is incredibly important, and that's okay. I work with MBA students, and so you're all laughing when I say money and MBA at the same time, right? I think a lot of them expect this to be their number one, right? They're going into business, particularly people that are going into finance or consulting. They expect this to be their biggest driver. And what's interesting is sometimes they'll find out it's not. And yeah, that's great. That salary is great, but this actually isn't what's motivating me. And I can keep growing in this, but I'm not getting any praise. So I'm leaving every day not feeling good. And this paycheck actually at the end of the day doesn't matter. On the flip side, I work with students that don't want to admit that this is a driver, because somehow there's like some shame in that, right? And there shouldn't be. There shouldn't be. Like, we are raised to think that money does matter and it can afford us a certain lifestyle. So money can show up in salary. It can also show up in bonuses and commission-based careers. So when I work with alumni that have a strong money driver, so their career language is money, is at the top. I talk to them too about potentially thinking about commission-based careers, because then the drive and the effort and the results you have are closely tied to your paycheck and what you bring home, and that feels really motivating to you, right? That shows appreciation. So it's funny, like I said, money can be kind of polarizing. People either want to think they have it or want to reject that they have it. But I think it's really important to know if this is one of your top drivers, because it's going to be your compass in choosing careers, and it also can be a driver with your boss. It could be the number one reason you're feeling not satisfied, is maybe you haven't had a raise in a while. Okay, number 4 is impact. So this is, you see your efforts in the results of the company. Sometimes it's tied to mission. A lot of times people think that this is like that mission-driven thing, right? It can be. It can be that I need to work in a place that's doing good, but it can also be, I just need to know that my work were tied to the results, that what I did brought that product to market, or what I did helped us make that sale, or what I did was so tied to the service that we gave. They need to feel like what they're doing is part of that bigger picture, and they need to see that really clearly. They don't want to feel in the weeds or pretty far back. They want to feel that impact. And this one is the one that I most often see. So at Carlson, we offer lifetime alumni coaching for our students. And so I have students that come back maybe after 2 years, maybe after 15. And the biggest, and a lot of times they come back because they're looking for some sort of switch, right? Looking for a switch, or they're being forced to switch. And one of the biggest reasons, one of the biggest love language or career languages that comes up at that point is impact. I'm not satisfied. I had no idea that I was so driven by impact, and I am. And I am in corporate finance, or I am doing accounting, and I don't feel like my job is tied to that end result, is tied to us getting that product out. And I want to feel that tie and that connection more. So this is the one that catches people by surprise. And this is the one that also takes being in the workforce a little bit to know. I had no idea that this was a driver for me until I was in the workplace longer. But it's the one that I think often asks for the biggest change. Okay, number 5. Number 5 is culture. And I think a lot of times people think that culture has to be happy, bubbly, we're all best friends place. It doesn't. Culture is actually defined as the personality or the character of your workplace. And when I say culture is your top language, meaning culture has to match yours, right? So the company culture doesn't have to be a certain way. It just has to match what your need is. So if culture is your top career language, there needs to be alignment between your personality and way of doing business and the place you work's personality. And obviously this is a big influencer for people. Every single city, every single major city comes out with, their business journal comes out with an X number of best places to work. And companies are hammering to get on that list because they know that if they're on that list, they're going to get that many more applicants to drop, because that's a great place to work, because culture is really important to people. I was just working with a student who is in our MBA program, and she is trying to decide between a couple of different companies. And she thought she wanted one company, and she's been doing a ton of networking and has offers from a couple. She thought she wanted one. She said, I've got to talk to you. I feel like this might be a weird feeling, but I feel like this company is pretty introverted and heads down and kind of serious. And I didn't know that I need a place that's like really collaborative and outgoing, where I can chat with people all the time, and it's just more of an extroverted culture. And I had no idea I needed that, but the more I think of saying yes to this company, the more I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to fit in there. And it was almost like being introduced to an introverted culture helped her realize that this is a big driver for her, that this was her number one driver. She didn't care about industry, didn't function. We weren't talking about which was paying more. We were talking about which culture would best fit her and keep her happy. So that was clearly her top driver and her top language. Another thing to note on this tends to be extroverts. Extroverts tend to have this as more of a top driver than introverts. Doesn't mean introverts don't care about culture. They do, it's just probably not going to be their top language. Usually extroverts want to be in an environment that matches that a little bit more in what I've noticed and seen. Okay, so those are the top 5. That's kind of my quick description of each, giving you some examples of what I've seen. I've created this matrix to sort of help you think about what are some statements that can ring true or not to you on each level for each language. So as you're looking at this, the statements go horizontally from each attribute. And you can see, some statements for praise is expects to be work and effort to be noticed, tends to compliment others, likely have awards on their resume. Prestige, you might have negotiated a job title at one point in your life. You value meeting with execs. You might have strong influencing skills, and so on. So as you're reading these statements, what I want you to think about is which area has the most statements that ring true to you. Which one of those languages has the statements that you resonate with? You might have some on all of them, but there's going to be an area or two that has the most that rings true for you. I'll show you mine. Oh yeah, you have a question?
Just, I don't know, for me, it would be helpful if you could differentiate between like the current need or like the current area that you want security.
Yeah.
The overarching, like more long-term vision of what you're like core value is? Like, how do you kind of
Yeah, like maybe when you're 25, money is a big deal, or or not. That's a really good question. I think that this can change a bit. So I think that you sort of have to have both things in mind. So I think, and that's why there might be a couple of top ones, and I'll share with you my example too. But money is one of those ones that could shift depending on time of your life, absolutely. Impact probably isn't. I also think that sometimes when you're in a career where you're not getting one, what you're not going to get is rising to the top. And that means it's fairly important to you. But what happens if another one shifted? That would feel bad too, right? So there's going to be a couple that are at the top, and then you'll find that there's some that you might not circle anything in. And those are ones that actually are probably ones that you don't value as high, and you don't need to think about it when you're thinking about a career. Does that help answer that a bit? Okay, so I'm going to share with you mine and just talk to you about how I've made some shifts in my current situation to meet this as an example, because I want you to think about this as a compass for some of you that are searching or knowing you need to go on your next step. This is important to notice. But also, if you're kind of happy in your current job, or you've got it pretty good, but something's kind of itching at you and not feeling good, it could be a small shift that you could make. So these are mine. Okay, so I knew after a few years of work experience that this was really, really important to me. Work in higher ed, like clearly, and this impact piece is what led me to want to move from a single contributor coach role into leading the team, because I felt like I could have more impact. I could reach more people. Like I could identify career trends and make changes to what we offer to students. Or I could create events that there was a lot of people that went, right? Like my impact, and I could have a broader impact on it. So that's what I knew that. The praise one came a little bit of surprise to me. I didn't know that I needed that so much. And so in my current role, I manage a team, and I was doing less one-on-one coaching. I'm also part of a really big unit where my leader has a lot of people that report to him. So I'm probably not getting regular, constant feedback all the time, because one, my role is really broad, and two, he's managing a ton of people. And after I was in my role for a few years, I realized I actually like to get, like, I like that feedback piece. And I couldn't change the structure of our unit or the nature of my job, and I'm still getting this impact piece a lot. But what I could change is one area, and one of the things that I can do is I can do more coaching. When you coach, and you make a difference in a student or an alum's life all the time, and they say thank you, and they say this that you told me on my resume helping us helped so much, or that conversation that you had with me about thinking where I should go changed my mind, and now I'm in a career that's so happy. It helped me get feedback. It helped me feel like I was doing okay, like I'm still good at this, I got this. And so I added more coaching. It was a small shift, right? The other pieces, culture and prestige, they're clearly kind of interesting to me. Apparently I don't care about money, don't tell my husband that. They're a little bit important to me, but clearly those two right now are the most. And to answer your question, if I was in an environment, or when I was coaching 100% of the time, and I was getting praise regularly, because you're helping students find jobs, like you're constantly saying thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a very intrinsically rewarding job. I didn't know praise was important to me because I was getting it all the time. But then when that got taken away, I realized, oh, I actually need this. And now I know that where any of my next career journeys are, I know that I actually need regular feedback. Like that is a piece that's important to me. Does that answer your question a little bit? All right. So this is the matrix. This is what I like to share, and I think it's helpful in figuring it out. I'm now going to go and have a couple slides of quizzes, and I'm going to ask you, some of you generous souls, to maybe participate a little bit and offer up what you think your top one might be. So, quiz time. It means the most to me when I make my bonus due to hard work and effort. I learn my work directly impacts us meeting our sales goals, or I have the opportunity to present to clients. My coworkers remember my birthday. My boss provides immediate and thoughtful feedback. What means, take a second, and anyone that wants to share what they think means the most to them. A couple are going to mean a lot, but what means the most? Yeah. What's your name?
My name's Anne.
Anne.
So I'm very driven by money in my role, and I think the way I view it is that it's all those. That's how I know I've done all those other things. So I don't need to hear the praise if you're paying me,
that feels like praise.
Then I know you think I've done a good job. Or I don't need, XYZ, because when I get the raise and I get the bonus, that's how I feel like.
That's how you feel that fulfillment.
That's how I feel that you're saying, if I didn't do a good job, you wouldn't have given me a raise. And so, bonus, due to hard work and effort, I think it's an interesting spin on it too. It's nice for me to know, yes, I worked hard and that's why I got it. But I think there's a component for me too that raise is, in the sense that is also a praise.
They don't even.
It's intrinsic. Like I like working hard and knowing I'm doing.
But it feels like praise too.
It feels like praise.
Yeah, I think.
Which is my other one too. I like also my boss emails me and said you did a good job.
Yeah, you like both of those things.
I like veteran emails me and says you did a good job and here's the money for
so
it.
both of those are tied to that validation of good job though. Both of those, both money and praise, are tied to a validation of good job. Yeah. Yes, and when they can both happen, it's magic. Then you found the perfect place to work. So you would say your number one is this top one. Yeah. Absolutely. And clearly you can see, these are fairly obvious, but that is tied to the money career language as being your top driver. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm Jude. It really surprises me, but it's my coworkers remember my
birthday. So that's that culture piece. Yeah. Feeling part of a team, feeling in a place where they get you, they match you, they know you, right? Knowing your favorite cake or whatever, right? Like it's understanding you.
So question. So I manage people, and I've got people that are very old and very young.
Yeah.
So can you talk to us about how these might change based on age, right?
Yeah.
So
I think that's a really good question, and I'm glad you brought up the manager piece, because for those of you that are managers, like look at this through a manager lens, because I'm always trying to too. And for me as a manager, having this framework has helped me because you manage everyone differently. And so generationally, I think I touched on this a bit. I think impact tends to be when you're more seasoned in your career, and I also think there's a generational thing with Gen Z that's coming up. They also crave that impact, right? So I think that goes across the board, but I do think people don't realize they need it until they were a little bit more seasoned in their career. And I think praise is very millennial. And I know I'm saying what we all know, but I do think that that's fairly millennial. There's a generational aspect of that, growing up and constantly getting feedback. So if you work with millennials and you manage millennials, they do need that constant feedback. They expect that. I think prestige, I think the title piece of prestige shows up more with more senior people, and that could, it's more traditional, right, to think of constantly getting an increase in title. That's a very traditional view of work. Prestige shows up with the younger generation in that influencing piece. Like, why don't I have a seat at the table? So I think so there could be nuances of each, and I could explain more too, but I think that's a great question. Thank you. Anyone else want to share theirs? Yeah, thank you.
Most definitely feedback from my boss.
Feedback, regular feedback. And have you been in, and so clearly you know that praise is part of yours, and have you been in an environment where you don't get that?
I guess less than I would like.
Okay, yeah. And so usually sometimes these are some of your motivators in your language because you're not getting it. I think that goes to your point. And that's okay. That's why we all have these experiences, is so you can realize what you do need. Okay, so one more quiz slide. My biggest struggle at work is I have little connection to the end product. My role is extremely tactical and I have little time with leaders. I work extremely independently. I rarely hear from my boss or colleagues on my performance. There is not an established bonus structure. So again, these are fairly obvious. You can kind of see what language they're tied to. Can I call on someone else to? Yeah.
I would say the extremely independently, or no, sorry, wrong one. The extremely tactile with limited time
with leaders. And that's getting to prestige, wanting to be around leaders and have a piece of that influencing decision making. Does that feel like it rings true to you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's more of, it's kind of a cross between culture and prestige.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to be in a collaborative environment, but I also want to be at the right table and not just in the weeds.
Yes. So you want to be with people, so being collaborative and being part of that influencing piece. So those are the two pieces at this point in your career, because this can shift, that you're going to be looking for. You're going to be looking for a culture that fits your personality, where you want to be around those people and it's collaborative, and also a place where you can influence.
Yeah, and I would say, to answer her question, 5 years ago, I really cared about the bonus structure and where my salary was going. And then I kind of hit where I felt comfortable, and now I don't. That's my least concern.
And what's interesting is I do think this plays out with money for some people. You have sort of in your mind what you're worth and what you should get to. And once you get to that, money matters less. For people that money is always a strong driver for, you always want to be making more, right? Like that's always tied to the effort and you saying I'm doing a good job. So that's kind of the difference. And sometimes it takes time to figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, in my current like life position, the not knowing if there's an established structure to getting a raise or having more time is important right now. But I have all the rest of those four. Like
so it's coming to the top because everything else feels like it's being filled.
Yeah, like I'm already totally content.
It's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy, like all this other stuff is,
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's interesting because I've never really been money motivated, but I've never been financially insecure before.
Yeah.
And so it's like that tipping point of, do you only believe it because you don't have it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And money and all of these are very much tied to how you grew up. Like once you dig into career and how you're motivated and how you're satisfied, it goes very deep, right? And so sometimes the money motivation is because of, not having a lot or being accustomed to a lot. And the same goes for all of those. So the more you dig into this, the more it can get pretty deep in figuring out why is this a motivator and accepting that it is, and then finding a way to make that a reality. Okay, so my last slide is I'm going to end with a quote from Mary Oliver, who's one of my favorite poets. And bear with me because this feels like I'm taking you on a tangent, but I look morning and night. I am never done looking. Looking, I mean, not just standing around, but standing around as if with your arms wide open. And she wrote this quote about spring. It's kind of like it is right now. Maybe it's March is what I'm picturing in the poem. And you're like, oh my God, is spring gonna come? I'm looking for that little sliver of green to pop up somewhere. So I'm gonna stand with my arms open and wait for it. And I think I wanna encourage all of you to stand with your arms wide open and expect a career that fulfills your love language. And the way to do that is to not settle, to not get complacent, managing a team, and not get complacent managing yourself, and know yourself. Take the time to know yourself and expect that you have a career that matches that need. Expect that you get to leave every day feeling fulfilled, feeling valued. And sometimes you can make small shifts to do that. And if you make small shifts and try to do that, and time again, it doesn't work, then I would ask you to stand with your arms wide open and find something that does, and find something that is in alignment with your career language. Thank you.
All right, both for people in the room and also online. For the folks online, if you want to type in a question, put it in the question pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. And also for people in the room, if you have additional questions, feel free.
Yes.
So I have a question about the differentiation and impact between impacting your company's results between impacting the world. Because what I found is I had some managerial jobs where, I did my job, I did it the best I could, but my motivator was when we served to a homeless shelter, a work event that did something like that. So, and I've left now to do teaching. So can you get that out of volunteer work maybe?
Yeah.
Impact, and is there a difference between wanting to impact your company versus having the goal of impacting the world in a bigger way?
So twofold. I think once you identify that impact is a strong driver for you, you need to impact something, right? So you went about and you impacted the bottom line for your company, and that didn't answer that. There is another assessment that I highly recommend called Imperative, and it helps you identify your purpose type. And one of the first driver that it looks at is who you serve, so who you impact. Is it an individual? Is it the company? Or is it society? And I have a feeling for you, impact is your strongest career language, and you want to have either society or individual impact, not organizational or company impact. So I feel like your question is kind of like twofold. And what's interesting is the more you do assessments, the more you can figure all of these out. So I think your strongest driver is probably impact, but you probably want to impact either society or individual, and you were in a role that was impacting organization, and that didn't feel as meaningful to you, is what I would say. Does that answer that?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the things that I really value in my job is that I can be here right now. I work from home, and my schedule is really flexible.
Yes. And you get bonuses and praise. This sounds amazing.
It's not like a culture thing, like is being able to work from home and having flexibility in schedule. Like autonomy is what's really important to me in my role. Is that a culture thing?
I think so. I do. I think it is. I think that you work I think it's working in a place that allows you to be autonomous.
Yeah.
And clearly, like I said, when we go back to culture, it is about the personality and the character of your organization matching you. You don't want to be tied to a desk 9 to 5. Right? You want to work from home. You want someone that trusts that you can work from home and you can have that autonomy.
Totally, to trust in that they know I'm going to do.
Yeah. So I do think that that's probably a value to you, and that does bleed into culture.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Yes.
I like know that we've kind of heard from the managerial side of things.
Yes.
As the only person in this room on my team, or from my team, how can I, like, as one of the mid to lower level people on my team, also bring this concept to light and like learn about my
colleagues? Yeah. So, I mean, I would have this conversation with them. I would bring them the matrix. I would, like, what do you all think? So that's why I shared that matrix, because I would encourage all of you to share. And I'm happy to talk, to talk to your organization about it. Like, where do you find most of your statements to be true? And there's more quiz questions that you can share and ask people, and then understanding what each other's are, particularly if you're managing or for your colleagues, understanding what they are will help you all work together better. Yeah, good question. I would start with the matrix.
We have a question from online. I've worked for managers who believe their staff should be molded to fit, the person is working for a manager who thinks their staff should be modeled to fit her work language style. So the manager likes team outings to ball games, and so they all go, even though some would like a gift card or half day off. Any advice for this person?
I would talk to your manager. I mean, obviously it depends on your relationship with your manager and how comfortable you feel, but you could even say something like, I went to this great webinar and it talked to, I'm calling my webinar great, but okay, so you like that? This fabulous webinar. No. So I went to this webinar and we talked about career languages, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I think it might be interesting for our team to do that, or I mean, you could have a broad conversation like that, or you could simply say, one of my top motivators is feedback, or and it's less about culture. I think you have to feel comfortable enough with your manager to say, for me, these team outings make me feel stressed because I can't do my work and I'm not making as much impact. Having that conversation with your manager, I think, is key. And I would encourage you to maybe have your manager check this out too, so they could potentially open their mind about how everyone is motivated in different ways. It can get tricky. Yes.
So I'm hearing a lot of, like your example as far as gift giving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you necessarily didn't self-identify that,
yes,
but someone else did.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about the pitfalls of self-identifying something versus someone identifying that about yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's kind of the trouble with assessment sometimes too, right? Because it's all based on how you see yourself. I think once you've figured out maybe what yours is, I would go to a trusted colleague, a partner, a boss, whatever, and say, hey, I think that this is my career language out of these 5. Do you think that's true? Or do you think any of these? And I think a combination of you and self-knowledge as well as somebody else's knowledge of you is a great conversation starter. So I think you have to talk about it. Absolutely. And I think more quiz questions to help, having play out scenarios. Yeah, I know. I'm a reluctant giver, love language. Ugh. Yes.
Beginning, you mentioned the friend introduced you to the book. I hadn't heard of that, the 5 love.
Yeah.
And you said that she did an assessment.
Yes.
Can you comment in detail about what happened? Did she just go through the book with you, or what?
Oh yeah, you can go online. You can type in the 5 love languages, and there's a free assessment. I think you have to give them your email address, and there's a free assessment you take, and it takes like 5 minutes. And I realized that, yeah, I like gifts a lot, very quickly. But yeah, I think to your point, like doing this stuff. Anytime you have an assessment, if you just do it in a black hole without having a counselor or a trusted colleague kind of process it with you, it doesn't mean much. So really talking that through is key. Yeah.
And as one of the older people in the room, I think you're also not emphasizing enough of finding that mentor and keeping that mentor in that role.
Yes.
Because that's a really good person that can, I mean, even if you read some of the books that have come out, Mama's book, Michelle's book talks about
mentors, absolutely, mentors and sponsors.
A mentor can help you, and potentially if you have an older one, have more time to actually help promote your career because they know people also in that career, or especially if you're making a shift.
Yeah.
They also have a broader network.
Absolutely. In no way do I want to diminish the value of mentors or sponsors in your career. Absolutely. Not only can they help you figure out what you want to do, you could talk to them about your career language. Hey, does this sound like me? And if so, how can I have this conversation with my boss who wants to take me on all these outings when I really just want to have an impact, right? Like, I think a mentor can be crucial in so many ways. So thank you for bringing that up.
Someone online asked if you have any other ideas for quiz questions that can help a person identify.
I do. I didn't put them all on here, but I think, a good day of work for me is, my favorite work memory is, and coming up with scenarios that kind of fit those buckets. I have a couple of examples of these, so I'm happy for people to reach out if that helps. Yes.
As someone who's currently in the market for a new position, how do you recommend going about, like, if I know mine is, impact and prestige, let's just say, when I'm reading job descriptions and going through the process of interviewing, how can I make sure, if you have any
really
tips
good. My biggest tip is not going to be that easy, but it's really talking to people at the company. Informational interviewing. I know I sound like a standard career coach, but yes, I mean, informational interviewing, talking to people at the organization. You can go online and read Glassdoor reviews and things like that. Oftentimes, Glassdoor reviews are people who hated the company or absolutely loved the company. So it's pretty polarizing. Sorry to anyone who works for Glassdoor on here. I mean, it's good for lots of things, but I do think you have to take into consideration that a review is a review. So I think asking people to coffee. So really looking within your alumni network, who do I know that works at the organization? I want to talk to them about what is the impact like? How do you work up? Is it influential? Do you have a seat at the table in your role? And asking questions, but instead of asking, tell me what the culture is like, which is what that really broad one, kind of is. That's what people are trying to get to when they're getting at all of this. You can ask really, really specific questions that aren't going to feel like you're not doing your homework. Because if you sit down with someone and say, tell me what the culture is like, they feel like you haven't done their homework and they're supposed to give you this like vague, broad answer. You can say, tell me about how you feel like your role influences. Are you part of meetings with senior leaders? How closely is your role tied, do you think, or do you see, or do you have conversations how your role is tied to product launches or whatever that, right? You can ask these really specific questions to understand if this would be the right place for you. And if they say something like, oh God, I don't know, I never see senior leaders, I just am kind of in my little unit, that might tell you something, right? Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it just requires a lot of time and coffee chats.
Questions?
Mm-hmm.
You know how companies do these surveys about career engagement and their
like the satisfaction of the employees.
And from your point here, it's so different for everybody. Do you feel the questions they're asking kind of cover all these areas, or I don't know if you have any?
No, I don't. I don't think they typically do. I think it's hard to, right? Yeah. I think it gets pretty broad. I mean, sometimes I think it gets to impact. Sometimes those questions will get to, do you see your role and how it achieves the mission of the organization, right? There's broad questions like that, but rarely does it, or do you feel valued? But that's so broad, and you might say no, but you don't know that. You're not saying you don't feel valued because you're not getting, time at the table with executives, right? So I don't think it gets into the granular. I think sometimes it gets broad. So usually if there's write-in, sometimes there's write-in. Once you know this, I would get fairly specific, and then that could be a potential conversation with your boss. Another thing is for a manager, or when you're thinking about working with your own manager, these are great performance review conversations. This is a great time to bring up, I love what I do, I love this industry, I love this function. One of the things that I've learned is I really, I feel fed and motivated when I feel like my job has influence. So one of the things I would love, and for you to help me think about this year, is how can I have more exposure to some of our senior leaders? Is there a way that I can do that? Are there project teams I can get on, right? These can be really valuable performance review conversations as well.
And I think sometimes with that either prestige or impact, maybe if you're in a small organization or a flat organization where there isn't either lofty titles or
Yes.
other leadership positions to move up, is talking with those employees about both their motivations, but then if it is a thing where if it's like, as far as impact or demonstrating that, yes, you might not be a vice president, but you can take leadership on this core thing that, influences our strategic plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can get creative, particularly when you think about size of organization. Yeah, good point. Thanks, John.
Maybe just one last question.
Yeah.
Since you're a manager as well, what's been your perspective as you deal with multiple employees who probably have motivations all across the board? Because like, as I looked at it, like I can see that in all sorts of different people. And so, yeah, I guess I wonder if it's like, obviously, could team dynamics be thrown off if, 3/4 of your staff are motivated by a certain one versus the other? I don't know.
It can be. So I don't know that I've figured that all out completely. I'm a work in progress, but I think I try to do a little of both. So like, how can I feed this individual and how can I make other things optional, right? Like, so some people, title is important. So how do you, and working in higher ed, you can't always just bump up titles, but how do I help them be part of more influential strategic meetings? How do I give them a chance to present? For some of my team or team that I've had currently or had in the past, that cultural piece plays, and the team outings with baseball. A question reminded me, I have some team members that really want a lot of team time together. And then I've got others that are like, I got kids, I gotta get home by 4, I don't care about happy hour, right? So like, how do I play to both of that? And I think my answer has been optional. Like, how do we make it optional? And how do we like have small meetings during the day that add kind of that like bonding exposure that doesn't require, too much time. That's a ball game. It's not going to bleed into your personal life. It's going to feed a lot of the people who have that cultural aspect. So it's a lot of kind of working around and negotiating and figuring it out all the time. Yeah, good question, John.
We have time for one more question. All right. Well, thank you, Maggie Tomas, for sharing your time and expertise today. And thank you to all the folks both here in the Lauka room. And we had over 50 people online this morning as well. So you were reaching out over the interwebs. I think that's a technical term. So, but again, thanks to those who help make initiatives like this webinar series possible. And you can help our global community of alumni and students ignite success by joining as a member at umnalumni.org/membership. And that's the conclusion of today's presentation. Thank you both, everybody in person and online who's joined us. And we'll see you soon. And for those who are in the room, it'll just take me a sec to shut down the webinar. So. Oh, no.